All right, tell us stories.
Okay. All right. The one thing I remember about Aunt Prudy is that they lived. You know where you
Go ahead. Tell them.
where you go down Snow Hill and then across a bridge toward Nashville, and then they lived out a road to the right, and then you had to go across another bridge to get to their house.
I don't know where that is exactly.
And Aunt Prudy kept me one time for some reason, and it rained hard, and the water got up so high that Mother and Daddy couldn't come get me that day. They couldn't get to me. They had to wait till the water went down the next day. And then there's Uncle Charlie, and he's one of the oldest. First there's Aunt Hale, and then Uncle Charlie of Mother's brothers and sisters. And Uncle Charlie was a rounder, and he one time tied the cow's tail to the barn loft and hit the cow and pulled its tail off, and Pappy was so upset, Pappy Hale was so upset that he whipped him and threw him over the fence. And he spanked him so much that he ran to Mammy, and Mammy was very wise, and Pappy was coming. He was so mad he was going to whip him again. And Mammy said, I just pulled his little shirt up. I don't know, it's little, I don't know how big he was. But anyway, said I pulled his shirt up and just showed him so he could see. She never said a word, you know. Mammy never fussed with Pappy. She'd just go out singing and make him so mad. The kids said she never fussed with him. She refused.
You ever remember anything she sang?
I didn't hear that. The kids, her children told me that. She always bragged that she and Pappy had never had an argument. You know.
Just loud discussions.
And she was 16 when they married. And
Mammy was 16 when they married.
Mammy was 16.
Okay.
I can't remember how old
Aunt
Pappy
Hallie
was.
and Aunt Prudy.
Yeah, Aunt Hallie. And Aunt Hallie had in the alley in Smithville, she had a beauty school. And my sister Faye went to beauty school there. And Aunt Hallie had a very hard life.
So Aunt Hallie.
But Aunt Hallie was married to Fred Cassidy. And he became mentally ill after carbon monoxide poisoning in World War II. And did you get that? That he did mean things? You already got that, did you?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's Turk's daddy.
Yes, that's Turk's grandfather. That's
Turk's
Joe.
granddad.
Joe's. And Aunt Julie was one of the older ones, and she married Charlie Gregory, and they didn't have a child for 20 years, and then they had Beverly, who is now Beverly Cantrell, and she had Bridget, Wendy, and by her first husband, John, and then she had she had Bridget, Wendy, by her first husband, John. I can't remember his last name.
John, okay.
And then now she's married to Jerry Cantrell, and she has
they're in Nashville, right?
in Mount Juliet.
Yeah.
And they have Greg together, who is grown now. And I spent multitudes of years of time all over the years at their house at Beverly's, or she was in the country. We planted tobacco plants together, rode the tobacco setter with Uncle Junior. We picked up potatoes and rode in the back of the truck. We hunted eggs together in the barn loft, and her daddy was very strict, and he whistled. He had a whistle for her, and it frightened her to death when she heard it. And one time she had hands full of eggs when we were coming out of the barn loft. She hadn't started down the steps, and he whistled, and she threw all the eggs up in the air and screamed and just got down as fast as she could and ran. These are two. We didn't know that till years later.
What was his name?
Charlie Gregory. He got saved.
Is he the one next to you? That we knew Chuck
Donaldson. But he got saved before he died. He even
Yeah.
his grandchildren too. Oh, his grandchildren. But anyway, he got saved before he died. And let's see, then there's Aunt Ruth. She had the most children. They lived in Nashville, and she married. Helen knows all the people at camp. She says they're fine people, you know.
Helen is
Uncle Howard's daughter.
That's where we are. We're on Uncle Howard anyway.
And she never had any children.
I'm going to walk and I'll be back.
Okay. She had, they had no children because Joe could not have children. That's why his wife divorced him. And, but Helen has mothered her whole family. She's been like a mother to her mother and daddy and her sisters. I mean, not her sisters, her brothers. And a wonderful person, and I love her. And, we call each other Lum.
She's
Lum
the
and
one that
Abner.
lives here that I met down at the Lebanon when we were at the Cedars Lebanon.
Yeah.
So that's Helen.
Yeah, and she lives out on Sparta Highway. And Carolyn.
She goes toward church?
She goes out there on the...
Indian Creek?
Yeah. Indian Creek. I went to Indian Creek School. I wish you'd find out exactly where.
You run from the dogs at her house?
Yeah. On Old Highway 70. And, then...
What did y'all do together?
Well, we all played together. I have 30-something first cousins, and we all met at Mammy's and played kick the tin can. It's played like
Really?
hide and go seek. We had a ball. Everybody came to Mammy and Pappy's on the weekend. She fed at least 30 people every weekend. You know, that's how many ate with her every Sunday. And she had a huge round table, and the first group would eat and they'd wash dishes while the next group ate. It would hold 10 people at the table. And Mammy cooked everything, and then she liked to cook it all and then just sit back and enjoy watching people eat. And she cooked extra on Christmas and Thanksgiving. She cooked extra and sent it to all the neighbors and anybody that was poor. And Mother said even when they didn't have very much, she'd give people stuff out of there, like hams and stuff, where they killed hogs and stuff. She gave. She couldn't give enough. And one Christmas, I remember Mammy Hale sitting in a rocking chair. She always sat in a rocking chair, and she and Pappy slept in a bed in the living room, and her rocking chair was at the end of the bed. And it was for all the neighbors, all of her family. There's no telling how many of her family, with 11 children, and I think she had 38 grandchildren at least, or maybe more, and 60-something great-grandchildren. And but she'd cook for everybody, and even and the neighbors and the dogs and everybody. And she sat down in her rocking chair. She liked to sit down and just watch people eat. She didn't want to eat right then. And she'd fix 2 or 3 or more meats and every kind of vegetable, and she made the best pineapple cake from scratch. And she didn't know how to make a store-bought, mix. You know, she didn't know how to make a mix.
About her crying.
But anyway, she had tears in her eyes. She sat down in her rocking chair, and she had tears in her eyes. And I said, "What's wrong, Mammy?" And she said, "Oh, nothing's wrong." She said, "I just wish I could do more." You know, she always wanted to do more. She was such a giver. And she was a big influence in my life and read the Bible to me when I was growing up. I sat at her feet in the house and out of the house. She had porch furniture. Let's see. Now, who's the next child? Well, I didn't tell you. Mother, of course, and we have, well, you know who we have. They shared Jane, Rita, and Jackie. And then Aunt Odell, she was a twin, and her twin died before birth. And she has Jerry, who we all call Buddy, and right now she's living with Jerry and Faye, his wife, at their house in Cookville because she's not in good health. And
She's living in Cookville?
She's living in Cookville right now. Faye quit her job to stay home with her. Buddy's, Jerry's wife. I call him Buddy. We called him Buddy when he was growing up, and I never got over it. And Aunt Odell married a Bloom, B-L-U-H-M, Odell Bloom, and they had Carolyn, Kathy, and Jerry. And then Aunt Barbara was born when Mammy was 46, and she weighed 10 pounds.
Oh.
And that was her 13th pregnancy.
Alright, keep on going.
And Aunt Barbara married Austin Billings, and they were...
Now, who is Aunt Barbara?
Aunt Barbara's
She's
mother's youngest sister. And see how many that is. See if that's
Get up
11.
there.
Well, I hadn't told that Uncle Junior. I should have told him first.
Aunt Barbara.
But Aunt Barbara is the youngest. And
Where she lived?
she died, she was the second one to die. Mother had 5 sisters to die in 7 months.
Oh.
And about 3 years ago, and we had 12 family members, cousins and all, that died that year. We were going to a funeral just about every weekend. And they had all lived so very old, except Aunt Barbara. She was only 69, and she had smoked, and she died of lung cancer, and they didn't find out about it until 2 weeks before she died. And they couldn't find out why she wasn't feeling good. Uncle Austin and Aunt Barbara were so much fun, and they cut up with each other. They loved each other so much.
Uncle Austin's who I'm thinking about that drove truck, and we stayed in their basement one time. Right.
He drove Trailway bus and Greyhound, later Greyhound. Uncle Austin used to take people.
Uncle
He's a lot of
still
fun.
living.
And he comes with his. He's remarried Regina, who's very sweet, and
His wife passed away.
Regina's husband. Regina and her husband were best friends with Aunt Barbara and Uncle Austin. And a year after Aunt Barbara died, they married. And Uncle Austin said if he ever remarried, he'd marry Aunt Barbara's best friend. Isn't that something? But they loved each other and like little teenagers all their lives.
Sweet.
And they had 2 boys and 2 girls, James and Larry and Denise. Denise lives in Collierville, Tennessee, and Angie. And since Uncle Austin has remarried Regina, they've built a house close to Angie, out in the country. And, Uncle Austin loves to come to Smithville, and his new wife has become loved by all also. Got to tell about Uncle Junior.
Alright. Yeah.
And the ones we're closest to are Uncle Junior and Aunt Opal. They never had any children, so they just tucked us all under their wings. They lived across the street from Mammy and Pappy, and Uncle Junior was a farmer, and Aunt Opal worked at the shirt factory and later worked at the hospital. She was the lady up front that when a patient needed a nurse, she called the nurse. And she retired from there. But she worked multitudes of years at the shirt factory, and Pappy was crippled with arthritis at a young age, Pappy Hale, and he would ride to town with Aunt Opal every day, and he swung himself on crutches because he had knots all over his joints. And he was a very tall and straight man. Not real tall, but he stood tall. And very thin. And his hands were totally crippled like this, fingers on top of each other. But he whittled, and he made everybody lots of things out of cedar, and every time I smell cedar, I think of him. He made everybody, all the girls, rolling pins, and he made lots of things out of cedar. But he went to town and sat on the court, in the courthouse yard, and talked to men each day and whittled, and took his lunch with him. And every day, when I stayed a lot with Mammy and Pappy.
Was he a Christian?
Oh, yeah. Not earlier. He bootlegged. That's how he got his land during the Depression.
I'm going to say that. Say that.
Pappy, in earlier years, before he became a Christian, made bootleg whiskey, and during the Depression, that's how he bought his land for $10 an acre. And
Keep going.
Pappy was, they said in earlier years, was a very nervous man, and he was crippled at an early age with rheumatoid arthritis. One time he fell out of the barn loft, and Mother was so nervous she tried to grab him and jumped out with him. But I never knew him to be nervous. He was a very witty man. He respected Mammy in the highest and made all the children and grandchildren highly respect her, which she was so highly respectable it wasn't hard to do. She was easy to love. And have been so special to so many in our family, but our family especially, and probably Aunt Odell's family especially. Well, everybody, all the grandchildren love them. All the children loved them. And those that are living do love them. Uncle Junior didn't get saved until after Pappy died in 1966 or 67. Mammy prayed for him for 40 years, and she told me once that she felt like giving up sometimes, but she said, I will not give up.
What was he like?
Uncle Junior was a moral man, but he had speech like GD and just in his adjectives.
Right.
He didn't mean a thing by it. He wanted his nieces to be very pure. He was such an honest man and an humble, pure. Uncle Junior has always farmed and had big farm equipment, and he's had hired men that worked all the time I was growing up.
First to have a combine, I think.
He had some of the biggest equipment later after we were grown to harvest soybeans, but in Smithville, when I was growing up, everybody raised tobacco, and that was their livelihood. And of course, they raised their own crops and everything. But Uncle Junior's always been a very hard-working man. He looks like Mammy Hale's side of the family, with the Indian blood in him, and Cherokee Indian blood in him. And but he just never had been saved. He was a good moral man, but never had trusted Christ and started going to church or anything. So right after
Well, I made it.
Pappy Hale died.
Ooh, it's hot out there.
He's recording me. Right after,
Oh, that's at Miss Taylor's, ain't it?
no,
Or is it?
no, the park, Audubon Park. Right after Pappy Hale died, Uncle Junior received Christ, and he had Christ totally transformed his mouth, where every word, not meaning anything by it, had been S-O-B and G-D. I never heard another word come out of his mouth from the time he was saved, and he'd done that all of our lives. And only Jesus could have done that. And from then on, he and Aunt Opal have always gone to church and been active. And Aunt Opal, we've loved her like a special aunt.
Where do they go to church?
They go to Mount Hermon Baptist Church, which is a Southern Baptist church now. Crossroads, when it's at the Crossroads, and we always called it Crossroads, though the name of it's Mount Hermon. And I made my profession of faith there. I was actually saved at home. I had been under conviction for several weeks, and I went to a revival there. I'd go to church there just to get a church pin. I'd get started at Christmas or something, or Easter. We'd go for the Easter egg hunt, and I'd get started, and they had church pins that you could earn. And I'd go 3 months and get a church pin, and then somehow or another I'd get lax and going, then I wouldn't go again maybe till Christmas or something, and then I'd start working on me another church pin. And I'd go for a while. So that was heavenly. All right. I think I was about 15 when I got saved. I'm off the beaten path of Aunt Opal and Uncle Junior because they're so special.
Okay.
But I was about 15, or I think. I need to go back to the records because I'm not sure. But I had been under conviction for weeks. I was staying with Mammy and Pappy a lot. I've stayed a year one time with them. Coming home here, there, and yonder. And we only lived about a mile from them, or 2 miles maybe. And I went to a revival one night, and I just felt like God was speaking to me, but I didn't know how to be saved, but I went forward for prayer. Well, all these men got around me and started praying and said, "Get up and say you're saved. Get up and tell them you're saved." And I went home to Mammy crying, and I said, "They kept telling me to get up and say I'm saved, and I'm not saved." You know. And
How old were you?
I was about 15.
Huh.
And Mammy said, "You'll know when you're saved. The Holy Spirit will make it known to you when you're saved." And I didn't know who this Holy Spirit was until I really started growing in the Lord. But after that, one night I was home, and I had spent 3 sleepless nights afraid I was going to go to sleep and go to hell, die in my sleep. And I didn't know how to be saved, but I knew that Christ died for me, had been buried and rose again, but I didn't know that's what the gospel was, to put your faith in Him and His death, burial, and resurrection. But I just knew I did what I knew to do, and I just cried out loud, "Lord, save me." And I didn't have assurance of that until I started growing in the Lord. But I did go true assurance. I had to wait a year to be baptized because they only got baptized once a year. And I was baptized in Shiny Creek, which is on the way to McMinnville.
Huh.
And there was a snake in the water. And I said, "Lord, you're going to," and it was so cold. And I said, "Lord, you're going to have to take care of that snake. I've been waiting a year for this, and I was afraid I was going to die before I could be obedient and get baptized." And so I got in there, and the snake got away. And I really didn't start growing in the Lord, though, till I was about 24, 25.
Okay, go
Maybe
ahead.
a major thing in y'all's
Go
life.
ahead.
I forgot where I was at. Okay. My Sunday school teacher, Mildred Vickers, took an interest in me as I was growing up.
She's still alive? Live here?
I think she still does.
Okay.
Her father-in-law led the singing there at the church. But Mildred Vickers, I guess we just had that one Sunday school class all those years. And because she was my teacher all those years. And I was very shy and very insecure in myself. And she made me think I was helping teach the class one time. And she took a special interest in me. And then when I was saved at home, I was so shy, I was just holding on to the back of the pew, and she sensed it when it was time that I had been saved and needed to go forward and make a public profession of faith in Christ. She came and took me by the hand, but she was sweet. Young. She was real young. And, but anyway, I really didn't start growing until later in years. But Uncle Junior and Aunt Opal were a great impact on my life, and I spent many wonderful days playing on the farm and working on the farm, going back and forth across the road to Mammy and Pappy Hale's and Uncle Junior and Aunt Opal's. Aunt Opal would go to work every day and take Pappy with her, as I said, to swap knives and whittle in the courthouse yard on the bench with the other men his age all day long, and then he'd ride back when she got off from the shirt factory. And I loved to slip over. They didn't lock the doors, and I would slip into Aunt Opal's house when she'd get home. In the wintertime it would be dark, and or in the fall. And one night I jumped out at her. I was always jumping out and scaring her, and one night she almost had a heart attack, and I never did it again.
Who did that?
I did that to Aunt Opal. But anyway, I had so many fun times. Aunt Opal took me blackberry picking all the time, and I'd wear Uncle Junior's overalls, and we had to watch for the snakes, and got covered in chiggers and had a ball. But Uncle Junior loved to fox hunt. We had wonderful times on the farm, though, with trees.
I used to jump out of his barn in the hay. Yeah, tell about a few more things.
I just had a wonderful childhood. Part of it was part of my memories. A load of my memories were on that farm, and playing hide and go seek with my cousins and kick the tin can, which is like hide and go seek, except instead of touching the tree.
How many cousins were out there?
Oh, we had 15 to 20 or loads more all the time. But when everybody got together on the weekend, you might have everybody, which would be 30-something, playing hide and go seek and kick the tin can and climbing trees and
I used to
running
jump
in the
out of the barn at Uncle Junior's, and I remember that they had water, well water they drew out, isn't that right? And I remember Uncle Junior dipping in in the back of Mammy's house, dipping water out.
It was a big mouth well.
Yeah.
They had to keep it covered, but Mother was always scared to death some child was going to fall in.
Big mouth well, I guess it's still back there?
Oh, big mouth well.
How deep is it, I wonder?
I don't know.
Still there?
I'm sure. But one time, you and Went were running at Mammy Hale's. Which one of you got your head under the barbed wire fence?
Yeah, I got my head cut on the
barbed wire fence. One thing at Joe Cassidy's house one time, I was over there and in their field for some reason, pasture where there was a midget bull, and that thing got after me, and I ran and ran, and I leaped over the fence and took the top rail with me of the wood gate, rather, and that thing just about got me. He was little, but he was horns and, bad.
No.
But
what
anyway,
about your home place with y'all's tree and
yeah,
phased?
yeah. we had, at our home place on the old Highway 70, we lived between new and old Highway 70, and all the neighbors loved each other, and we would go out, and we had wall-to-wall kids because we had a small house, and finally we just had 2 bedrooms and never did have doors on the bedrooms. We had curtains, and we didn't ever have a bathroom in the house. Mother and Daddy moved out in 71 and got a house with a bathroom.
That's where Grandma is now.
And that's where Grandma is now, where Mother is now. And still doing. But
Okay.
we had small rooms and a wood burning stove in the middle.
In your house before.
In the middle room
Before 71.
before 71, where I grew up, in the little white house on old Highway 70. Daddy planted trees, and they grew with us. And we played baseball. Faye and I did with the, and I think Jane, as she grew up, played some with us. But Faye and I were we played with all the boys in the neighborhood. We played baseball every afternoon, or basketball in the chicken.
Tomboy.
Yeah, we played basketball in the where the chickens were, and it was kind of messy. And next door, and that house was made just like ours, except Daddy finally built a den on the back and a kitchen made together. And but he had water running for Mother in the kitchen, but he never made us a bathroom in the house. And I guess that's about the only quiet time we had when we went to the outhouse. We had a homemade one at first, and we thought we were really uptown when we got a construction one, like they use on construction sites, and it had 2 holes in it, 2 seats.
That's like plastic?
Huh? It was like metal, I think, or something.
Oh, okay.
Or maybe that plastic stuff, I can't remember. But we took pan baths behind the curtain in the bedroom during the week, and we had a wash tub in the outbuilding that we got in on weekends. Had a real bath. But we had good baths. Even Mother taught us how to be really clean. And but we had a good time growing up, and at our house, and Daddy took me hunting with him. I was never allowed to carry a gun for some reason. And but Mother worked hard and made our clothes and painted the little house inside and out every year herself. And
what did your dad do?
And my dad worked at one time selling fruit trees, and he went all in the east part of the Tennessee, selling fruit trees. And then he worked for an insurance company, and then tried the shirt factory a little bit and hated it. He couldn't stand to be held inside.
Let's see where we are. Okay.
The last 10 years of Daddy's working career, he was an aide at VA Hospital in Murfreesboro. And he went to school. They sent him to school the whole time there, and they let him do things far beyond what he was supposed to do as an aide. He helped do autopsies, and he always made like 98s and on all of his. They said he would have made a wonderful doctor, and they wanted him to work in the Smithville Hospital and regulate people's medicine, but he wouldn't. He didn't want to.
And draw a little bit, didn't you?
Oh, he drew, and he played the guitar, and at one time he sang on the radio with the quartet. I never heard that, because that was before we were born. But he sang Mares Eat Oats and Does Eat Oats and played his guitar.
How many brothers did your daddy have?
My daddy only had one brother, Bobby, and he died a few years, well, first Grandma and Grandpa died. Daddy died in his 64, which I'll be there soon. and he dropped dead beside me. He had heart trouble. He had about a thumb of his heart left. He'd had so many heart attacks from smoking. Even though he'd been quit for 25 years, the damage had been done.
Yeah.
They said he had such a healthy body because he took vitamins. He took lots of vitamins. He cut ginseng in the woods and took it and ate the root.
Yeah.
He ate wild poke salad. He loved it. He'd bring it in like turnip greens, and Mother would cook it with eggs, and Mother cooked humongous meals for us. We had the biggest breakfast anybody I know ever had, and she had all the children and not much time to get it all done because she waited on everybody hand and foot. Did all the laundry by herself, did everything by herself, and she didn't want us to have to work like she had worked, which wasn't a good thing. We had to learn after we got married. But Faye was probably more industrious. She probably did more than I did at home. We did wash dishes, and I helped mow the yard, and that was my job, mowing the yard. And we took turns washing the dishes, and probably Mother'd rather done it herself, because we'd say, no, I dried last, no, you washed last, no, you did something last, and we'd get in a fight over it, you know. And something flashed. And so I was made to go on every date with them. So I'm sure they loved that. But they got married at an early age, 17, and they went off to dental school. Kenny's 4 years older than her, and he didn't want to leave without her. So Mother said she's been grown since she was born. And she's been like a second mother to the whole family. She has. She cares about everybody and does for everybody. And gives to everybody. Well, good. Good. Let's see. Uncle Junior used to go fox hunting at night, and Aunt Opal loved Elvis movies. She and Elvis were the same age. And she would load us all up in her car, as many of the grandkids as she could get in there. I think all girls. We'd have feet hanging out the windows and everything as we went to the drive-in on Saturday night.
By Brashears, or no, I mean...
where you go out to the camp, right there, where the green...
Driver's nursery.
Yeah, where the nursery is. It used to be that was the only movie. Well, we had the Fox Theater in town when I was growing up.
Really?
Yeah, Fox Theater. And it was bad because when it rained, the rain came down the walls and seats came loose and the bugs crawling down the walls and stuff, but everybody went anyway. And but we'd go to the drive-in with Aunt Opal, and I can remember going to the drive-in a few times with Mother and Daddy, and she'd put us a porta potty in the car and pop popcorn and have drinks, and we weren't allowed to get out of the car.
Who was that?
Mother and Daddy.
That's funny.
And had a good childhood, had a happy childhood growing up, an innocent childhood growing up. And I didn't learn to do a lot of the things that other people do because I guess I was climbing trees. I didn't learn to sew. I can do a little sewing that I learned in home ec, but I just wasn't interested in those things. And
you don't know.
I would like to now, but I never did learn. But I had boys, and so that's okay.
That's right.
I know Mammy and Pappy Hale had an orchard, and birds would nest down in the holes of the trees. And something about gathering eggs and finding nests of any kind to look at. I always gathered the chicken's eggs for Mammy, and one time I one started cackling, and I ran and put my hand under her, and she laid it in my hand.
No kidding.
Laid the egg in my hand. And but there was something just intriguing about bird's nest, and I found a bird's nest in the ground behind Mammy Hale's house one time, and I got a cage and tried to keep those birds, but you can't do that. They died. And one time a quail nested in her strawberry patch, which was over right past her house, right on the side of there before the orchard. She had a big orchard there of all the fruit trees. And I've watched that quail's nest every day, go into that quail's nest, and Mammy said, you won't be able to see them. They're camouflaged. They're so little, and they just run around, and you can't even see them when they come hatch out. And sure enough, I watched that thing every day for 2 weeks and didn't get to see them when they came out because they were camouflaged. They're little bitty things when they come out, she said. And I've told my grandchildren the Mammy Hale snake stories about when one day I was sitting out in the front yard just kind of daydreaming. There was a little pile of sand there, and I had one of Mammy's old spoons just kind of digging around thinking when I was younger, and I looked up, and a black racer was right in my face with his head up. And I can't stop my feet from running anytime snakes are around. I hate snakes. And I ran, I'm sure with adrenaline, faster than I'd ever run to the house, and I said, Mammy Hale, there's a snake out there. And she said, I always tell my grandchildren this, and she said, well, get the hoe and kill it. And I said, no, I'm afraid. And she said, well, I'll get the hoe and kill it. But it was long gone. I probably scared it as bad as screaming as it. But it did chase me part of the way to the house.
That's funny.
And one time one chased my mother, she said, when she was younger, and Pappy had sent her through the woods to get some of his tools. And she had a hammer. And that snake was chasing her, and she threw that hammer at him and ran. And she said she never did go back. Jar of baby rattlesnakes. She thought they were worms.
Say that again.
One time Faye came in when we were growing up with a jar of baby rattlesnakes. She thought they were worms. I guess she thought she was getting them for Daddy for fishing. A whole jar. I mean, there was several. Baby rattle. They didn't bite her, praise the Lord. She didn't even know what they were. She thought they were worms. But they were baby rattlesnakes.